Okay. So we just start with the. We have to start to describe the muscles, the different type of skeletal muscles. But just to recap a little bit, the last point of last week, we finished on Friday, I think, to analyze this important graph here. The graph is showing the timing of the electrical and mechanical events during the electrical coupling of the skeletal muscle. The somatic action potential here in the upper panel is followed by the skeletal muscle action potential here, more or less at the same time, a little bit later, but more or less at the same time. And then a single contraction relaxation phase here, a single twitch. If you remember, the name of a single contraction and relaxation phase is called twitch, okay? Take place few milliseconds after the action potential in the muscle. Why? Because the period that is called latent period is necessary in order to contract the muscle. So in order to allow the increase of calcium inside of the muscle, the calcium can bind to the troponin, can move the tropomyosin, and the power and the stroke of the muscle can take place. We have already seen the video last week, so I'm not going to show it again. But I would like to introduce now some important feature of muscles, okay, of skeletal muscle from a physiological point of view. Okay, we know until now that in order to contract a muscle, we need ATP and we need calcium. And we already understood that is constantly, for muscle contraction, necessary the presence of ATP and calcium. But we already know that we have always ATP in our muscle. Okay, even if we work a lot, we will spend a lot of ATP. At the end, we always have a little amount of ATP to do some exercise, for example. So, as you know, muscles require this energy, but not only for muscle contraction, but for numerous processes that we already analyzed. Calcium is important for the cross bridges and for the power stroke formation, but calcium is also, ATP is also extremely important to the uptake of calcium ions. So another important function of the ATP is produce the myosin ATPase and then the contraction, but also the uptake of calcium through calcium pumps. Okay, they are present in the membrane of skeletal muscle, or sarcolemma and sarcoplasmatic reticulum. And this is really important for the decrease of calcium inside of the cell and the muscle relaxation. So we spend a lot of energy to produce the calcium relaxation, the muscle relaxation. But again, also the sodium, potassium, ATPases needs a lot of ATP, a lot of energy. We spend a lot of our ATP in order to maintain the electrochemical gradient in the cells. In fact, the sodium, potassium, ATPases restores the ions that cross the cell membranes during the action potential to the original compartments. And at the end, they maintain the electrochemical gradient. So, the skeletal muscle require always a steady state supply of ATP, okay? Like a store of ATP. But where do muscle get the ATP they need for all these processes? Not only for the contraction, but all these processes, they happen in the skeletal muscle. And remember that it has been calculated that in the muscle fiber, 1 molecule of ATP is sufficient for about 8 twitches. So when you are in the gym and you are doing exercise, you spend 1 molecule of ATP for about 8 twitches. So you need a lot of ATP in order to produce a lot of exercises. And as a backup of energy source, as a store of energy source in terms of ATP, the muscles contain the phosphocreatine, as you can see from this picture, okay? Phosphocreatine. So what is this molecule? Let's analyze the muscle at rest, okay? The resting muscle store energy from ATP in the high energy bonds of phosphocreatine. The ATP, I don't know if you already analyzed the phosphocreatine and the ATP production in biochemistry, but the phosphocreatine is a molecule whose high energy phosphate bonds are created at rest. And when ATP is necessary, we can just using the ATP product. Now, this man is sleeping in the hammock here, and ATP can be used to produce the phosphocreatine. So when we start to work, like in the other example here, the same man with the muscle active, such as during this exercise, the high energy phosphate group from the phosphocreatine is transferred to the ADP. So the ATP is created to power the muscle and do all the exercise that we need. And also all the process in which the ATP is involved. So the phosphocreatine here is produced when the muscle is at rest and is used here when the muscle is working. But not only when the muscle is working, but also from all the other processes that needs the ATP, such as the calcium ATPase, the sodium potassium ATPase, etc. The phosphocreatine breakdown produces a short burst of energy. Okay, this is a burst of energy from the ATP. And we can use this ATP when we need a an energy stored of ATP like the phosphocreatine. Obviously, you should know this process from biochemistry, but the energy stored in high energy phosphate bonds is very limited. So muscle fiber must use the metabolism to transfer energy from the chemical bonds of nutrients to ATP. We cannot use all the phosphocreatine, all the ATP that we have in our body. Obviously, from biochemistry, we have to produce ATP from the metabolism. And I think that you will study this process also during the course of Physiology of Nutrition, okay? But you already know from biochemistry that the carbohydrates, the glucose, are the most important and most rapid and the most efficient process in which we can store energy in aerobic and anaerobic condition. And we can obtain from the metabolism, from the carbohydrate, different amount of ATP. With the aerobic respiration, okay, you already studied the aerobic respiration in biochemistry, right? We can produce a large amount of ATP, a large amount of energy, 30 ATP for each glucose molecule, but the process is slow. The oxygen is required. So when we are doing exercise, our skeletal muscle can use this large amount of ATP, but remember that this ATP is produced slowly, okay, and the oxygen is required. Differently with the anaerobic glycosis, okay, that produces lactate or pyruvate. It's a quick process, no oxygen is required, but obviously small amount of molecule of glucose, of energy is released. So the muscle can use the energy from the glucose from the aerobic respiration or from the anaerobic respiration, anaerobic glycolysis. But we use different amount of energy. And you will study also from the physiology of the digestion, of nutrition, you will see that the energy for the muscle can be obtained also from fatty acid by using oxygen, okay? But in any case, at the end, we have to use always the ATP or the phosphocreatine produced by our muscles. So now we know already that in some way skeletal muscle can produce ATP, and we will use it during exercise. Okay? High amount of ATP here and low amount of ATP here. So now it's important to see, okay, which muscles can use the ATP, because all the muscles in our body are different. I mean, there are a group of muscles in our body. We use different type of muscles for different type of exercise. Who would have more fast twitch fibers in leg muscles? A marathon runner or a high jumper? Obviously, these two types of athletes, they have different type of muscles. In this case, you have to produce a very high amount of exercise, but longer in the exercise, in the time. A marathon runner, a high jumper needs to spend a lot of energy in a very short time. So they have a different type of muscle. Let's analyze each type of muscle we have, and then see which muscle are present or more present in a marathon runner or in a high jumper. Because in any case, at a certain point, even if the ATP is present, the muscle goes in a condition called fatigue. So, a physiological terms that describe a reversible condition in which a muscle is not longer able to generate or to sustain the expected power, okay, the fatigue. I don't want to enter into detail into the fatigue phenomenon, but just to remember and to say that skeletal muscle is classified by speed and fatigue resistance. So you already know that the muscles are divided is classified by speed of contraction and fatigue resistance. So you already know, because it's quite obvious, is if the skeletal muscle of a marathon runner or a high jumper is which one is more resistant to the fatigue compared to the other. It's quite obvious. But in any case, we have to analyze the two types of muscle. This one is a slow twitch oxidative muscle fiber. So, slow twitch is a muscle that is resistant to fatigue, is dependent from the oxidative metabolism. There is a large amount of red myoglobin. It is important for the transport of oxygen. There are numerous mitochondria, so the metabolism is extremely high, and an extensive capillary blood supply. You can see here the muscle is more red. The other fast twitch glycolytic muscle fiber are morphological different. You can appreciate here a stained skeletal muscle. You can see that the diameter is larger, the color is less red compared to the slow twitch, and this muscle is quickly fatigue muscle. So from this picture, from these two pictures, you can immediately appreciate that the fast twitch muscle fiber and the slow twitch muscle fibers that are at the opposite, okay, they use different metabolism, oxidative and anaerobic glycolysis. They have different type of diameter, smaller, bigger, and they are fatigue resistant and not fatigue resistant. They are easily fatigued. So it's quite obvious that a marathon runner has a measured amount of this type of muscles compared to this one. But in any case, we have to keep in mind that muscle have plasticity, like neurons, and they can shift their type depending on their activity. Okay, human muscle are a mixture of fibers type, with the ratio of types that vary from muscle to muscle, and from one individual to another individual, and from the type of exercise that we perform, if we are just exercising for a marathon runner or to jump a long distance. Okay? In this slide, you can just see two groups, two different groups with different functional, biochemical, and morphological features. And for me, these two types are sufficient to describe the type of skeletal muscle that we have in our body. Okay, there are other subtypes, but it's not necessary for you and for our course to understand other type of subtypes of skeletal muscle fibers. Just remember the slow twitch fibers, okay? Slow twitch fiber or oxidative or type 1, they have different name. In our book you can find other subtypes, but these two, as I told you, are just the two most important types. Slow twitch fibers, in the upper part of the figure, they develop tensions lower than the fast fiber. The slow twitch oxidative muscle have a small diameter, the darker color due to the presence of myoglobin that transport oxygen. They have more numerous mitochondria and an extensive capillary blood supply. So, all these characteristics are important for the slow twitch oxidative muscle fiber because they demonstrate why this muscle is fatigue resistant. And in the other case, the fast twitch fibers here, okay, develop tension 2 or 3 times faster. They have a large diameter, pale color, but they can easily fatigue. So, the amount of this muscle or this muscle can describe the type of exercise that we are doing. A marathon runner should have more of this type of muscle, but a high jumper, this type. Okay? Remember also few things from these important characteristics of muscles. That the speed with which a muscle fiber contraction is determined depends by the isoform of the myosin ATPase. You remember when we discussed about the contraction, and the contraction can take place when the calcium is present, but also depends from the myosin ATPases, okay? Because the myosin is a protein that is able to use the ATP in order to produce the power stroke. So if the myosin ATPase is low, the twitch is low. And there are different forms of myosins. Okay, this is really important because the myosin is, again, it's called myosin ATPase, so the myosin dissolve the ATP, and from this and from the hydrolyze of the ATP, the energy that the muscle get from the ATP is produce the contraction. So the speed, remember, the speed with which a muscle fiber contraction is determined depends by the isoform of the myosin ATPases. Obviously, this fast twitch fiber means that the fiber contains a myosin isoform that splits the ATP more rapidly, okay, compared to the other muscle. So, one thing important is the speed, that it depends from the myosin ATPases. And this one is faster and this one is lower. And the duration of the contraction depends either to the fiber type. The twitch duration is largely determined by how fast the sarcoplasmatic reticulum removes calcium ions from the intracellular part of the skeletal muscle, from the cytosol. Fast twitch fibers have a quicker capacity to rapidly pump the calcium ions into the sarcoplasmatic reticulum. Because it's faster, we need to remove the calcium rapidly, so the fast twitch fibers have quicker capacity to rapidly remove, rapidly pump the calcium ions into the sarcoplasmatic reticulum. And they also have, as we said before, different ability to resist fatigue. As we said before, oxidative muscle fibers rely primarily on the oxidative phosphorylation for the production of ATP. For this reason, they have more mitochondria, they have myoglobin for the transport of oxygen, they have more blood vessels, they obtain ATP from glucose metabolism and in an elevated amount, as we said before. And again, the glycolytic fibers, this one instead, do not have the capacity to resist fatigue for a long time. They rely primarily on the anaerobic glycosis to produce the ATP, but a small amount of ATP. And in addition, the accumulation of acidic H+ from the ATP hydrolysis contributes to the acidosis. And then the acidosis favors the fatigue phenomena. So glycolytic fibers, okay, fatigue more rapidly and easily compared to the oxidative fibers. But obviously, when we need to do an exercise with a strong power, we use this kind of muscle here, the fast twitch glycolytic muscle fibers. So, after all of this information, who will have more fast twitch fiber in leg muscles? A marathon runner or a high jumper? So let's see this slide just to recap all the things that we were talking until now. As you can see here, there are also a mixture of fibers, just to let you know that there are the fast twitch oxidative glycolytic fiber. So not only one type of fast twitch, but there are another type that have some characteristics that are in the middle between the fast twitch and the slow twitch fibers. And in this slide here, you can see all of these characteristics of skeletal muscle fibers type, and it's something like a resume, a schedule resume of all the things that we are discussing until now. Again, in a muscle fiber, it's also important to describe the tension, the maximum tension, the force that we can produce while we are contracting the muscle. So in a muscle fiber, the tension, the force, okay, some books write here the force, but the real name of the contraction is the tension of the muscle that is developed during a twitch. And the important point here from this graph is that the tension, the force developed during a twitch is a direct reflection of the length of individual sarcomeres before the contraction begins. Let's see the graph. Here is the tension. Here is the optimal resting length of the muscle. Okay, so this slide shows you that each sarcomere here, the panel A, B, C, D, E, okay, each sarcomere contracts. Okay, and remember, the contraction of the sarcomere is not the same that contraction of the muscle. I can contract the sarcomere without contract the muscles. I can create a tension without a contraction of the muscle. We will see it in a minute. Okay? But in any case here, the slide shows you that each sarcomere in each position contract with an optimal force, like if it is at optimal length before the contraction. For example, what do you think? Why I'm able to produce a high tension here in the C position compared to the A position? Why this muscle can produce here a high tension, a high force, and here is not possible? Just because the myosin head and the actin portion here are in a best condition in order to produce the power stroke. Here, all the myosin head and the actin protein are completely overlap. So here, I cannot produce tension. Here, yes, at 2 micrometer, 2.3 micrometer, I can produce the best tension because it has been calculated, okay? It has been calculated by scientists that work in skeletal muscle, and in this condition, I have the best condition to produce the best tension in a skeletal muscle. In the normal resting length, this one, okay, of skeletal muscle, in the middle, we are sure that sarcomeres are at the optimum length when they begin to contract. What if the sarcomere is in the position E, here, more than 3.7 micrometer? The muscle is in this condition, okay? And it's quite difficult to produce the best tension in this condition compared to this condition, okay? The more cross bridges are formed between thick and thin filaments, the higher is the tension, and you can have the higher tension here compared to here. Clear? But as I told you before, until now, we have seen only a single twitch, a single phase of contraction here and relaxation here. This is a single twitch, okay? And in this case, the contraction of this muscle is 100 milliseconds, okay? And the single twitch tension is determined by the length of the sarcomere. We just have seen this point, okay? So it is important to note that a single twitch does not represent the maximum force. It's quite obvious. The peak here in the tension is not the maximum force that a muscle fiber can develop. Okay? Why? Just check the panel B. We have seen this point also in neurons when we were talking about spatial and temporal summation, and we have more or less the same. This is a temporal summation of what? Of stimuli close together that are so close together that the muscle do not relax completely. The summation here in this case